I thought I was losing my mind when my electric bill doubled overnight. I live alone. I work all day. And yet, every morning I'd wake up to an outlet humming on the side of my garage, used. So I set up a hidden camera. What I caught on video wasn't just theft. It was my HOA's vice president, Karen, sneaking onto my property at 2 a.m., charging her mobility scooter from MY Outdoor Outlet, and flipping me off on her way out. That was the moment I stopped being nice. I'm an electrician. I rewired the outlet with a remote-controlled surge trip. The next time she plugged in, she blacked out half the block and exposed the HOA's dirtiest secret. It started with something small, almost too small to notice at first. My electric bill had gone up, not by a lot, but enough to make me raise an eyebrow. At first, I thought maybe I had left the garage light on overnight, or maybe the old fridge in the basement was finally giving up and eating more power than usual. I live alone, so it's not like there's someone else flipping switches when I'm not looking. But then there was a humming. It would happen late at night, just as the house got quiet. A low, soft buzz, faint but steady, like something was running. Not inside, though. From outside. I tried to ignore it the first few nights. Figure it might just be a neighbor's air conditioner or maybe a lawn light from across the street. But it kept happening. And then my porch light started flickering, almost like it was struggling to stay on. That's when I started paying closer attention. One night, I stepped outside around midnight just to check. I stood there on the porch, listening. Nothing. But when I walked down toward the side of the garage where my outdoor outlet was mounted, I swear I could still feel the faint heat coming from a metal cover. And then I saw them. 2 narrow tire marks in the dirt, right next to the outlet. Small, shallow, too thin for a car. They looked like scooter tracks. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person who tries to think rationally before jumping to conclusions. So I told myself maybe the lawn guy turned around there earlier that day. Maybe the meter's just off this month. Maybe I'm imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was off. It wasn't just a bill or a flicker. It was a feeling, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, like your space is being messed with, and you can't quite prove it. So I decided to stop guessing. The next day, I went to the hardware store and picked up a motion-activated camera, one of those discreet, little ones that look like a doorbell. I mounted it right above the outlet. Not too obvious, not too hidden. Just enough to see if anything weird was actually going on. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even mention it to my co-workers when they asked why I looked tired the next morning. I just smiled, said I was dealing with a bit of a pest problem, which technically wasn't a lie. I went to bed that night like usual, but this time I was hoping the humming would come back. The next morning, I didn't even make coffee. I went straight to the footage. I sat down at my computer, opened the app connected to the camera, and started scrubbing through the timeline. Most of it was just still frames, shadows shifting, the occasional moth dive bombing the lens. Then, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the motion alert kicked in. There she was, a woman, short, stocky build, blonde hair in a tight bun, wearing this ridiculous bright pink windbreaker and driving, of all things, a motorized scooter. She rolled up to my side yard like she owned the place. No hesitation. No looking around. Just pulled right up to the outlet, plugged in a thick black cord, and leaned back like she was charging at a public station. And here's the kicker. While her scooter started humming away, she actually muttered something under her breath. Something like, "Told you this idiot wouldn't notice," and then flipped off my house, like she was proud of herself. Like I was the one out of line for catching her. I sat there, just staring at the screen, mouth slightly open. Not just because she was stealing electricity, but because I knew her. Karen, vice president of the HOA. The same woman who had knocked on my door 2 months ago to hand me a pamphlet about acceptable fence heights, even though I'm not even in the HOA's jurisdiction. She's the type that always wears those weird sun hats with the neck flap, walks around with a clipboard, and acts like she runs the block. But I never thought she'd literally sneak onto my property in the middle of the night and jack electricity like some sort of suburban bandit. This wasn't just theft. It was trespassing. Still, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she thought it was public access or a communal outlet. I mean, it was a stretch, but I wanted to keep things civil. So I waited until I saw her the next morning. She was out walking her little white poodle, all smiles and fake charm. "Morning, Karen," I said, walking over with my phone in hand. "Hey, quick question. Have you been using the outlet on the side of my garage?" She blinked at me like I just asked if she speaks Portuguese. "Excuse me?" "The outdoor outlet," I repeated. "It's just that I've had some weird activity on my electric bill, and I caught someone on camera last night charging a scooter out there. Looked a lot like yours." Her expression didn't even twitch. She just gave this little sniff and said, "I think you're mistaken." "I've got the video," I said calmly, keeping my voice even. "If you want to see it, I can pull it up." That's when her whole tone shifted. Her eyes narrowed. Her lips tightened. "If you have video surveillance facing shared HOA space, you could be in violation of privacy ordinances," she snapped. "And if you've made modifications to an exterior power source, that's a code violation. You might want to review our electrical guidelines before trying to trap people." I stared at her, stunned. "You do realize I'm not part of the HOA, right?" I asked. She smiled. That smile. The smug one. "Every home in this neighborhood falls under our covenant. It's just a matter of updating the paperwork." Then she turned and walked away, dog trotting behind her, like she hadn't just admitted to creeping onto my property and threatening me in the same breath. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just some petty misunderstanding. This was war. The next day, a thick envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, but I didn't need one. I knew who it was from the second I saw the clipboard-style formatting inside. Violation notice number 1. Improper trash can placement. Violation notice number 2. Unapproved exterior lighting fixture. Violation notice number 3. Non-compliant driveway border materials. I stared at the paper like it had personally insulted my intelligence. My trash can have been out for maybe an extra hour after pickup. My garage light was a cheap motion sensor I installed for security. And my driveway border? Gravel. Literal rocks. That's what they were going after me for now. I walked straight over to Karen's house. She was out front, trimming her hedges with those oversized garden shears like she was auditioning for a home and garden horror film. I held up the papers. "Care to explain this?" I asked. Try not to lose it. She didn't even look up. All violations were reviewed and approved by the HOA Compliance Committee. "There is no committee," I said. "It's just you, and I'm not even part of your HOA." She finally turned, smiling sweetly. "Your home was built during Phase 1 of development. The original charter includes your parcel. Your grandfathered in." "That's not how that works." I shot back. "When I bought this place, my realtor made it clear, no HOA. That's why I bought it." "Well," she said, brushing a leaf off her sleeve, "sometimes paperwork gets overlooked. We're just trying to bring the neighborhood into alignment." I swear I saw the sparkle of pure evil in her eyes when she said it. From that moment on, it was like the HOA had made me their personal project. I started getting letters every few days. Complaints about my lawn being 1 inch over regulation height. Notes about my recycling bin being visible from the street. Even a warning about my wind chimes being disruptive to the acoustic integrity of the neighborhood. Whatever that means. She wasn't even being subtle. One afternoon, I caught her measuring my mailbox post with a tape measure. When I asked her what she was doing, she claimed she was verifying federal postal compliance. I didn't even know that was a thing. Then the city got involved. I got a letter from the local zoning office saying someone had anonymously reported that I'd added unauthorized electrical features to my property. They wanted to schedule an inspection. I called a number. The guy on the line sounded confused, said the complaint didn't even make sense, but they still had to send someone out to check. Meanwhile, my camera kept catching her. At least 3 nights that week, she rolled up again and plugged her scooter into my outlet, like she owned the damn place. She even brought snacks once, sat there munching on trail mix while draining my power like some weird suburban vampire. The worst part? She never looked guilty, never nervous. She acted like it was her right to be there, Like she was doing me a favor by not charging me with some imaginary HOA violation. I started to feel like I was going crazy. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, she twisted it. Every time I followed the rules, she made up new ones. And the cherry on top, she was literally stealing from me in the middle of the night on camera. And somehow, I was the one being investigated. But I didn't yell. I didn't snap. Because I had something better than anger. I had patience. And I had a plan. I don't like to brag, but I know my way around a breaker box. I've been a licensed electrician for years, and while I mostly work commercial jobs these days, I still keep my tools sharp and my mind sharper. So when Karen kept stealing my power despite the cameras, despite the warnings, despite every passive-aggressive attempt to make her stop, I knew it was time to stop playing nice. One Saturday afternoon, I pulled my gear out of the garage and got to work. Nothing flashy, nothing visible, just a little rewiring inside the outlet casing. Something subtle. I installed a hidden GFCI interrupter and routed the outlet through a load-sensing breaker I could trip manually. It was clean, quiet, and entirely legal. The kind of setup that would work like normal for me. But the moment someone drew too much power, boom, everything downstream would go dark. And I knew Karen's scooter was an energy hog. Those things suck juice like they're charging a Tesla. Once the wiring was done, I synced the outlet to a motion-activated alert on my phone. Same as before, but this time, when she showed up, I'd be ready. No confrontation. No yelling. Just karma delivered on schedule. For 2 nights, nothing happened. The camera showed nothing but raccoons and a neighbor's cat taking a detour through my yard. I started to think maybe Karen had gotten wise. Maybe she'd moved on to some other poor soul's outlet down the block. But then, on the 3rd night, at exactly 2:06 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Side yard outlet. I sat up in bed, heart already pounding. I tapped into the live feed. There she was, Karen, in all her smug late-night glory. Same scooter. Same pink windbreaker. She rolled right up, looked around once, didn't even see the camera, and plugged in like she was clocking in for a shift. I gave it 10 seconds. Then I tapped the breaker control. From a camera feed, I saw her scooter lights flicker, then die, and in the background, just beyond her shoulder, the porch light on her house went dark. 1 second, everything was humming. The next, blackout. She looked up confused, tapped the scooter controls, looked back at her own house like she couldn't believe what just happened. Then, out of nowhere, alarm sirens. Her home security system started wailing like a tornado warning. Apparently, the sudden loss of power had triggered a system reboot. I sat there in bed in the dark, watching it all unfold on my phone like a perfectly choreographed play. Karen stood frozen, caught between her scooter and her darkened house. Her face was a mix of confusion and panic. She yanked the plug out of my outlet and tried to turn the scooter back on. Nothing. She cursed, loud enough for my mic to pick it up. Then she started slowly rolling away, pushing the scooter with her foot like a kid on a broken razor. I watched her disappear into the shadows, the sound of her home alarm still screaming behind her. And in that moment, I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. She'd trespassed, stolen, lied, and harassed. And now, she'd finally gotten exactly what she deserved. About 15 minutes after she disappeared into the dark, I started hearing the commotion. Even from inside my house, I could hear her alarm still going off. One of those high-pitched, ear-splitting ones that sounds like it belongs in a prison, not a suburban home. And then came the shouting. First, just her voice, yelling something unintelligible. Then the lights in her house flickered back on for a second, just long enough to see her silhouette moving around like a madwoman through the windows, before everything went black again. It was like watching a haunted house lose its mind. Soon enough, neighbors started poking their heads out. Porch lights came on. People started gathering in front yards in their pajamas, whispering to each other and trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And then, right on cue, the red and blue lights. 2 police cruisers rolled up in front of Karen's house, siren silent but lights flashing. I stood at my window, arms crossed, sipping my coffee like it was a front row seat to the best show in town. I figured they'd knock on her door, take a statement, and maybe tell her to stop wasting resources. But I should have known Karen wasn't going down quiet. Next thing I know, one of the officers is walking up my driveway. The other's still at her house, trying to calm her down. I step outside before he even reaches the door, hands up casually. "Good evening, officer," I say, as friendly as I can manage at 2:30 in the morning. He nods. "Sorry to bother you, sir. Your neighbor, Ms. Karen Thompson, she's alleging that you, tamper with her electrical system?" I blinked. "Seriously?" "She says you sabotage her home's power from your property, that it caused her entire system to crash." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You've got to be kidding." He didn't smile, but his face said he wasn't exactly buying her story either. "Do you have any reason to be messing with her electricity?" I pulled out my phone. "No, but I do have a reason to be monitoring my own property. Care to take a look?" I opened the security feed, pulled up the video from earlier that night, and held it out to him. There she was, plain as day. Karen rolling onto my property, plugging her scooter into my outlet, leaning back like she was kicking off her shoes at a spa. And the best part? The timestamp in the corner, 2:14 a.m. The officer watched the footage, his brow furrowing deeper with every second. When the clip ended, he handed the phone back slowly. "So, she was on your property?" "Without permission," I said, "and using my electricity. This isn't the first time, either. I've got a dozen clips just like it." He exhaled and nodded. "All right, hang tight a minute." He turned and walked back across the street. I couldn't hear what he said to her, but I saw it. He said something. She shook her head. He said something else, and then I saw it. Her mouth opened, her face froze, and then she pointed toward my house like she couldn't believe this was actually happening. Even from my porch, I could read his lips when he asked, clear as day, "So, why were you on his property at 2:14 a.m.? Her face turned beet red, then pale, then red again. I wish I had taken a picture of that moment. It was the exact second she realized her little game was over. And me? I just stood there, leaning on the porch rail, letting it all soak in. Finally, a little justice. I figured after the police visit, Karen would back off, maybe crawl back into her house for a while, and try to pretend none of it ever happened. But I underestimated how deep her delusion ran. The very next day, less than 12 hours after the power outage fiasco, I got another envelope in my mailbox. This time, it wasn't just violation notices. It was a full-blown formal complaint, filed through the HOA, signed and stamped. Apparently, I had weaponized my electrical system, violated neighborhood safety standards, and created an environment of hostility. She was demanding the HOA fine me $1,000, remove my outdoor outlet, and mandate a formal apology. I nearly choked on my cereal when I read it. And then came the cherry on top, an email forwarded to me by a sympathetic neighbor. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to pursue legal action against a homeowner who had endangered the community. I wasn't even part of the HOA, but she was trying to use their resources to sue me. That was it. I was done playing defense. I opened up my laptop, logged into the neighborhood Facebook group, and posted everything. I didn't rant. I didn't scream. I just laid it all out. Screenshot from my camera footage, timestamps showing her on my property, close-up photos of her plugging in the scooter. I even posted a freeze frame of her flipping me off mid-charge. Then I wrote one simple caption. Since Karen wants to talk about community safety, here's how she's been treating my property. At 2:14 a.m. multiple times. Just so we're all clear. The post exploded in less than an hour. Comments started pouring in. First a few shock reactions. Then the floodgates opened. OMG, she did the same thing to me but with my hose. Just started using it like it was public property. She tried to fine me for having a blue door, blue. My husband a veteran. It was a flag-themed paint job. She once threatened to evict my tenants because they parked too close to her sidewalk. She doesn't even own the sidewalk. It was like everyone had been holding their breath for years, and now that someone had finally stood up to her, they couldn't hold it in anymore. One woman, an older neighbor named Rita, even came forward with copies of HOA expense reports that didn't add up. She'd been treasurer for a while before Karen pushed her out. Turns out, Karen had approved nearly $3,000 in emergency maintenance over the past year, and every receipt linked back to repairs done at her own house. A new water heater, a roof patch, even a backyard fence replacement, all paid for with HOA funds. Suddenly, it wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a scandal. The comment section turned into a community forum. People started demanding a special meeting. Neighbors who had stayed silent for years were now emailing the board, demanding answers. Someone even started a petition to remove Karen from the HOA entirely. And me? I just sat back and watched. It was the first time since this whole thing started that I actually felt the neighborhood rally around something. Not just me, but each other. People were pissed. Not just because of what Karen did to me, but because she'd been bullying everyone. Her little empire of fear and clipboards was crumbling. And honestly, it was about damn time. The neighborhood didn't waste any time. Within a week, someone printed flyers for a special emergency HOA meeting, and every mailbox within 4 blocks had one. I wasn't even a member, but I still got one, probably as a courtesy, or maybe just to make sure I showed up, and you better believe I did. That night, the community center was packed wall to wall. I've never seen that many people care about anything HOA related before. Folks were standing in the back, whispering, side-eyeing Karen as she sat stiffly at the front table, arms crossed, lips pursed so tight they looked like they were trying to disappear. She thought she was going to talk her way out of it. You could see it in her face. She still believed she was untouchable, that she could bully, guilt-trip, or gaslight her way out like always. But this time, she didn't get the chance. Just as the meeting began, 2 uniformed officers walked in. Calm, quiet, official. They made their way right up to the front of the room and asked her to step outside. The whole place went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen stood up, sputtering something about this being a mistake, that she was being publicly humiliated, that the HOA board would not stand for this. But no one moved. No one came to her defense, because by then everyone knew she'd been charged with trespassing, thanks to the footage I'd shared, harassment based on multiple neighbor testimonies, and the real kicker, HOA fraud. Those expense reports from Rita, they nailed her. The misuse of community funds was enough to trigger a full audit. The cops had seen enough. They escorted her out with her little pink windbreaker flapping behind her like a surrender flag. It was quiet. No handcuffs, no screaming. Just a slow, steady march of someone who'd finally run out of people to bully. She was forced to resign from the HOA the next morning. They fined her, not just for the theft, but for mismanagement of funds, false filings, and a whole laundry list of technical violations. Word spread fast that her house went up for sale just days later. No sign, no open house, just a quiet online listing that screamed, "Get me out of here." And then she was gone. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. So, to celebrate, I did what anyone would do. I threw a damn barbecue. I strung up fairy lights across my lawn, the exact same ones she once claimed were excessive light pollution. Set up tables, got a smoker going, handed out cold drinks to anyone who stopped by. People brought sides, music played. Kids ran around barefoot on the grass. It felt like a real community for once. Free of fear, free of her. And just to make sure the story lived on, I mounted a little bronze plaque next to the outlet on the side of my garage. It reads, "Not for Karen's scooter." People laughed when they saw it. A few took pictures. But one guy, an older neighbor I barely knew, came up to me and said, "You know, that plaque might have just saved this whole street." I just smiled, handed him a burger, and said, "Happy to help." Karen thought she could drain my power and walk away. Instead, she flipped the switch on her own downfall. And that's a power move she'll never forget.